shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Before the last election, Prime Minister, you promised that Australian families would be better off. And yet the Prime Minister promised a $275 cut on 97 occasions before the election. Instead, they've gone up by $1,300. We've had the largest fall in living standards in history. Our country is divided. 29,000 small businesses have gone broke.
Order.
And this Prime Minister's record adds up to nothing. How can struggling Australian families and businesses possibly afford another 3 years of the Albanese government?
Order. Members on my right. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for his question, and he speaks about division, the great divider of Australian politics, the great divider of Australian politics. And
Order.
I know that in his talk to the party room this morning, he spoke about the division in their ranks behind him was what he was worried about, Mr Speaker. He was worried about the undermining from those opposite, picking on Angus Taylor, picking on the Shadow Treasurer. And no wonder those opposite, when asked a question on insiders or on the other Sunday programs, cannot say anything about what their policies are, what the costings are, what their alternative is as they go forward. Mr Speaker, tonight we will hand down a budget that confirms the fact that inflation is going down. We inherited an inflation rate that had a 6 in front of it, was going up. It's now at 2.4 and is going down. We inherited wages, low wages being a key feature of their economic architecture, and now wages have gone up 5 quarters in a row. We inherited legislated tax cuts that were aimed at all of us in this room, not the people we represent. And we changed it so every Australian got a taxpayer, and those opposite said we should go to an election last year as a result.
Order.
And what we have
Members
done,
on my left,
and you'll see more tonight, is provide cost of living relief, because we understand that Australians have been under pressure from global inflation. So that is why we have provided a range of cost of living measures, all of which have been opposed by those opposite. We, of course, have had 2 rounds, and then we announced on Sunday that in the budget tonight there'll be a 3rd round of energy relief. All opposed by those opposite. And they have the hide to talk about gas reservation from time to time. Well, part of the cap on gas and coal was about reservation, was about making sure that the manufacturing sector could have access to that gas, but they've just discovered it as well. They opposed the cheaper medicines policy that we've put in place. They opposed every other measure, including cheaper childcare. They opposed free TAFE and said people don't value it because it's free. Every single measure that has been put forward, they have opposed, because they don't know what they're for, they only know what they're against. And what they have is secret cuts that they want to implement after the election.
Time has concluded. The House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How will tonight's budget continue the work of building Australia's future? And are there any other approaches?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Chisholm for her question. Well, tonight the Treasurer will hand down his 4th budget, and it's a budget that invests in building Australia's future, a budget that helps every Australian with cost of living, which remains our top priority. Because of the hard work that we have done, the Australian people, our economy is turning the corner. Inflation is down, wages are up, unemployment is low, interest rates have started to fall. And we've achieved this the Australian way, looking after each other, working together, not copying from other countries, but investing in the things that work for us. Now, tonight's budget will deliver new cost of living relief to every Australian in every part of the country. Every household and business will receive another $150 off their power bills. Tonight's budget makes record investment in education. We know that those opposite, when they came to office in 2013, their first budget ripped $50 billion out of health and $30 billion out of public education. And yesterday I announced our schools funding agreement with Queensland Premier David Crisafulli. This brings every single Premier and Chief Minister to the table to make sure that every Australian child can have the resources that they deserve so they can fulfil their potential, so they can be not left behind. A really important reform of which we are very proud. Tonight's budget strengthens Medicare, increased urgent care clinics. Instead of the 50 that we promised, we've delivered 87, and we're going to deliver another 50 on top of that. On top of that, we have the $1.7 billion we've produced for increased hospital spending in the next year. On top of that, of course, it's our cheaper medicines policy. Now, we will make medicines even cheaper, just $25, the same price that they were way back in 2004. And this year, Australians will face a very clear choice. Labor's plan to keep building or Peter Dutton's promise to cut everything. We know that the Leader of the Opposition has a record of gutting Medicare, and we know he has a plan to do it again. He has said if you want to know what people will do, have a look at their track record. And we know he's got to find $600 billion for nuclear reactors somewhere. So when he cuts, the Australian people pay. The test for his budget reply is whether he comes clean on what he's going to cut to pay for his reactors.
Order. Give the call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for the Environment. In recent days, the Prime Minister has expressed no confidence in this minister by introducing specific— Mr. Speaker.
The Attorney-General may not like what is being said, but he shall not interject while the Deputy Leader is asking her question, and out of courtesy to her, she'll be invited to begin her question again.
My question is to the Minister for the Environment. In recent days, the Prime Minister has expressed no confidence in this minister by introducing specific legislation to curtail and override her powers under the EPBC Act. Under the new legislation, does the minister retain the power to stop salmon farming at Macquarie Harbour after the next election?
Give the call to the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Water.
Well, I'd like to thank the former Minister for the Environment for that question and say to her she received the report of Professor Graham Samuel into John Howard's broken environment laws. She had every opportunity as the Environment Minister at the time to fix it, and she did nothing. So what we're doing with this amendment to the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act is a very specific amendment that will apply in very limited circumstances to reconsiderations. A very small number of reconsiderations that meet 4 particular criteria. The criteria are that the original decision was not a controlled action if undertaken in a particular manner, that the activity underway is ongoing or recurring, that the activity has been ongoing or recurring for 5 years before the reconsideration application was submitted, and finally, that the activity is being carried on under the supervision of a state or territory government, for example, a state or territory environment protection agency. Under the existing law, as the former Minister for the Environment should know, an activity, including an established industry, could be shut down overnight if an environmental assessment had to commence. The former Minister for the Environment could have fixed this problem. She could have fixed this problem in any way she chose to when she was the Environment Minister, but she didn't.
Order.
As I said at the beginning of my answer, Mr Speaker, this applies to a very small number of potential decisions. Of the 7,000...
I'll listen to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. The point of order is on relevance. The question asks whether the minister retains the powers. The minister seems to be suggesting that this bill is completely unnecessary and that she does retain the power, but it can't be relevant to the question.
Your seat. I'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the rule on direct relevance applies to the entirety of the question, not just the last few words, and the prelude, the preamble in that question opened it wide up.
The Minister was asked a pretty specific question, and I am listening carefully, and she's giving information about the legislation and the characteristics around it. So I just want to make sure she is being directly relevant, and there was a obviously political component to the question at the beginning, which she's also entitled to answer as well, or to address as part of the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I've said every time I've been asked about a specific determination under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, if I predetermine something that is potentially litigated before me as a decision maker, that ends us up in court. Just as when the Leader of the Opposition last week said that he had already made a decision about a Western Australian project, the resources industry in Western Australia blanched. They went white because they were so worried about the prejudgment of a potential decision and the fact that they would end up in court as they have in two specific court cases that the Minister for Resources is dealing with right now.
Concluded. Order. Members on my right will cease objecting, so shall the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. So we can hear from the member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making medicines cheaper for all Australians, and why is it important to make medicines cheaper, and what are the risks to cheaper medicines?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Robertson for his question. He knows when we came to government, about 1 million Australians were saying they were either deferring or not filling at all the scripts their doctors were giving them because of cost. And that's why the member for Robertson promised his electorate in the Central Coast we would make medicines cheaper. And, Mr Speaker, we have delivered on that promise. 66 million additional free scripts for Australia's pensioners. We made the biggest cut to the price of medicines in the history of the PBS, down to $30. And we finally allowed doctors to issue 60-day scripts, giving patients twice the amount of medicine for the price of a single script, Mr Speaker. Already, these measures alone have saved Australians $1.3 billion at the pharmacy counter, Mr Speaker, but we know we can do more. And that's why this year we froze the price of PBS medicines for Australia's pensioners right up until the 2030s. And that's why last week the Prime Minister announced that we'll cut the maximum price for general patients even further, down to just $25, Mr Speaker. Now, had we done nothing in this term of parliament, that price would have hit $50 next year. Not $25, but $50. So, for example, the 500,000 Australians who are now on Eliquis, a very important stroke prevention medicine, would have been paying $600 a year for that life-saving medicine. Now, next year, with a 60-day script, they'll pay just $150, a 75% saving delivered by Labor, Mr Speaker. But, as the question says, of course, all of this progress is at risk. Now, last week, as the Prime Minister said earlier, the Leader of the Opposition said past performance is the best indicator of future practice. And he's right. So let's look at this man's past performance, Mr Speaker. Of course, as Health Minister, he tried to jack up the price of medicines by up to $5 a script and make pensioners wait even longer to access the free medicines we're currently delivering them by the tens of millions. And this term, more recently, of course, they voted against our cheaper medicines policies and consistently described our measures as wasteful spending. Now, Mr Speaker, as we lead into the election, my guess is that the Leader of the Opposition is now going to put his hand on his heart and promise there will be no cuts to Medicare, Mr Speaker. Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, Mr Speaker, just like in 2013 when time and time again he promised there'd be no cuts to health. Well, we know there will be cuts, Mr Speaker, and we know Australian patients will pay because that's his past performance, because in his heart of hearts he's never supported Australia's Medicare. He wants an American-style system of use.
Before I call the Leader of the Greens, I would like to inform the House that present in the gallery today are participants of the 30th National Schools Constitutional Convention being held in Canberra this week. These exceptional Year 11 and 12 students have been selected from across the nation to explore the Australian Constitution and our system of federation. On behalf of the House, welcome to Parliament. The call to the Leader of the Australian Greens.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Your government has approved over 30 new coal and gas projects, and now, on the eve of an election and under cover of the budget, you are gutting our environment and climate laws, removing scientific protections against more coal and gas and other corporations, and driving an iconic species to extinction. Prime Minister, after 3 years of broken promises on the environment, why are you now doing what the Leader of the Opposition asked by gutting our climate and environment laws?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
What absolute nonsense from the member from Melbourne. Absolute nonsense. The leader of a political party that stopped climate action the last time we were in government on this side of the House. Stopped climate action and, as a direct result, led to Tony Abbott sitting in this chair. That's what occurred. But what my government has done proudly is not just have effective climate change targets of 43% by 2030, but a plan to get there. A plan to get there through our capacity investment scheme, through our safeguard mechanism, by working with business to make sure we get the investment in renewables which is occurring, making sure that we do that. And across the board, the environmental reforms that we've put in place, we are targeting making sure that more of our lands and waters are protected. And just on Saturday, we had, through this Environment Minister, a $250 million announcement to expand land protection in this country so that we work there. Whether it's that or the Urban Rivers program, making sure that we protect that. The work that we've done in the Murray-Darling Basin, making sure that that protection is there as well. Right across the board, my government is one that has led on climate and the environment, led not just here, but in the work that we're doing globally as well. Australia is now out of the naughty corner and back around the table, acting on climate change as part of global efforts and acting on the environment. That's why also we follow the science, and the member refers to the issue of Macquarie Harbour. We have committed $37.5 million to Maugean skate conservation, including the successful captive breeding program, remediation, expanding the oxygenation program in the harbour, which the science tells us is working. What you can't do, and what we will never do, is say we don't care about jobs, we don't care about science, we're going to just back ideology. But those opposite in the Tasmanian Greens have never seen a job they didn't want to destroy. They don't support the Marinus Link project to provide renewable energy from Tasmania onto the North Island. That will make a difference. They're opposing wind farms in Tasmania as well. right across the board. Wherever there's a job, they're opposed to it. Well, what we are as a Labor Party is we will always defend jobs, but we'll also defend sustainability very proudly.
Order. The member for Riverina will cease ejecting. Give a call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to build a better and fairer school education system? Are there any risks to this?
Give a call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the best member for Bennelong we've ever had. Mr Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister signed an agreement with Premier Crisafulli to fully fund all public schools in Queensland. And this is the last piece in the puzzle. This agreement means that now every public school in the country will be fully funded. No government has ever done this before. This is the biggest new investment in public education by an Australian government ever. Ever. It's worth an additional $16.5 billion over the next decade. And it's not a blank cheque. This is tied to the biggest reforms to school education in decades. Real and practical reforms designed to help children who fall behind when they're little to catch up and keep up, help more young people finish high school. And it's bigger than that, because, as we all know, a good education can change lives, but a good education system can change countries. And it's changed ours. Under Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, the number of children finishing high school jumped from 40% to almost 80%. And that was nation-changing. It created jobs and businesses that otherwise wouldn't have existed. And when the Liberals were last in government, they ripped the guts out of public school funding, $30 billion worth. And we're still reaping the consequences of that today. Because since then, the number of kids in public schools finishing high school has dropped from 83% down to 73%. This is what we have to turn around. It's what these agreements fundamentally are all about. This is real microeconomic reform. Because if we're going to build Australia's future, if we're going to build the country of our imagination, then we need people to build it. And this is about helping more young people finish high school and then go on to TAFE or to university to build the skills that they need for the jobs that exist today and will exist tomorrow. And that's what this is about. This is what Labor governments do. And it's what Liberal governments always try to undo. Labor builds and the Liberals cut. It's what they did last time. It's what they'll do again. And the opposition said as much himself the other day when he said, quote, "You should look at what politicians do as much or probably more than what they say." Well, there it is. There's all the evidence you need that he'll cut and you'll lose, that he'll cut funding from our public schools, and it's parents who will pay. It's children that will pay. It's every Australian that will have to pay, all to pay for $600 billion worth of nuclear reactors.
Give the call to the member for Durack.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. Will the Minister make a decision on the future of the North West Shelf gas expansion before the upcoming election?
Call to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Durack for her question. The Department is assessing the project in accordance with Australia's national environment laws, which, as we all know, were put in place by John Howard's Liberal government. I have consistently, every single time I've been asked about a decision in this place, said that I don't comment on decisions before me. The reason that I don't comment on decisions before me is, as the Minister for Resources can tell you, it leads to court cases. She's been engaged in 2 court cases cleaning up the mess of the previous government, where the previous government and the previous Prime Minister, when he swore himself in as his secret minister, prejudged a decision, made a decision, and it ended up in court. But I can say very clearly that our broad approach will always be to follow the law and to follow the science. And as I said about the Leader of the Opposition's reckless announcement last week, all he did when he made his reckless announcement last week on North West Shelf, which is exactly what I've been asked about.
Minister will pause. The manager is going to be entitled to raise his point of order.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The point of order is on relevance. There's no way that the minister commenting on the opposition can be relevant to the question which said, will the minister make a decision? And secondly, on the substance of her answer, we're not asking for an explanation on the substance of her decision. It's the timing of the decision. The timing of the decision.
The member for McEwen.
And the timing of the decision cannot be relevant to what the minister has rebutted, but certainly talking about the opposition can't be relevant.
The minister was not asked about the Leader of the Opposition or order or alternative approaches. She has been dealing with and giving her explanations around the decision. That's definitely been in her answer. If she's going to talk about any other policy, she won't be able to. She's got to talk about what she was asked about when the member for Durack asked her about the North West Shelf gas extension. So whatever she says will have to be relevant to the question, because it was a very tight question. So she can't go into alternative policies unless it's about specifically what she was asked.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I was asked specifically about a decision on the North West Shelf project, and I was asked about the timing of the decision on the North West Shelf project. And I've explained that it's important to not prejudge these decisions, because if we prejudge these decisions, they inevitably end up in apprehended bias questions before courts. And the Minister for the Resources has had to clean up 2 apprehended bias court cases generated by the previous government prejudging resources projects. No, I'm explaining exactly how I'm being relevant.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition will just help out by not interjecting as much.
And so what I would say, Mr Speaker, is that it would be very dangerous for me as a minister or for anyone else to make a prejudgment about any project, because if someone did that, the most likely outcome would be that that project would end up in court.
Order. The minister is answering the question directly relevant by explaining why she's not going to give the answer you want, and she's giving specific reasons why that is. So she couldn't be more direct relevant. She may not give you the answer on the timing, but she's explaining why that's the case. So I can't make her answer the way you'd like her to, but in anyone's opinion, she's being directly relevant.
And Mr Speaker, I'll just finish by saying it would be foolish in the extreme to prejudge a project like this, because it just ends up in court like your last ones did.
Called on member for Reid.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How has the Albanese Labor government prioritised acting on energy prices? What would alternative energy policies mean for household bills and the budget?
Order. Look, we're just going to take the temperature down on this one. Order. Order. No, it's far too much noise. The Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her question. And of course, the Albanese government has prioritised urgent action on relief for households when it comes to energy prices, with 3 rounds of household energy bill relief. Mr Speaker, 3 rounds, 2 of which were opposed by those opposite, and a third which was announced by the Prime Minister and the government on the weekend, of an extra $150 worth of support for Australian families, because that's what Australian families need and deserve, Mr Speaker, in a period where energy prices are elevated around the world. The Albanese government has got the backs of the Australian people to help them through that period, Mr Speaker. And of course, the other thing we're doing is continuing with what the experts say is the best plan for the cheapest energy prices going forward, whether it's the Australian Energy Market Operator or the Australian Energy Market Commission or the Australian Energy Regulator. All three of our expert bodies have said at various points over the last 12 months the best thing we can do is keeping on going with the rollout of renewable energy.
New England.
The Energy Regulator herself pointed out, Mr Speaker, that in the last quarter of last year there were 23 high-price incidents as a result of coal-fired power outages. We've got to replace that coal-fired power with new, cheap, reliable energy, Mr Speaker, and that is what we are doing. Now, the member for Reid asked me if there are any alternatives, and I can tell her in the House there are. There's one big and expensive alternative, Mr Speaker, and just because the Leader of the Opposition doesn't talk about it anymore doesn't mean it goes away. You've announced it, it's there, it's on your books. You can't run from it now, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition will have to own this policy all the way to the next election. And this policy will put upward pressure on prices in a couple of ways. Firstly, it will keep that coal in the grid for longer. The Leader of the National Party has talked about it himself. He's been honest about it. So we need to sweat these assets longer. We need this coal-fired power for longer, Mr Speaker. That means more unreliable power and it means more expensive power. The other way that it will impact is the fact that this is a $600 billion cost to the taxpayer, Mr Speaker. The Shadow Treasurer was on Insiders on Sunday. He was asked about this. He couldn't remember the cost. And then he said it was $600 billion. Then he just kept saying it was 44% cheaper. Now, what he didn't reveal is that that's based on producing 40% less electricity, Mr Speaker. Now, the Leader of the Opposition will be up on Thursday. Perhaps he's going to announce their health policy with 40% less patients by 2050 to make it cheaper, or the education policy with 40% less students to make it cheaper, or the defence policy to cut the defence force by 40%, because that's what they do. They just say, well, we'll just make less. It'll cost less. Mr Speaker, all this spending will have to be paid for by cuts. And we agree with the Leader of the Opposition. Look at past performance. He's cut health before. That means when it comes to the Leader of the Opposition, he will cut and the Australian people will pay.
The call to the honourable member for Capricornia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. With the Labor governments of New South Wales, Victoria and Western Australia actively extending the life of coal-fired power stations, can the Minister confirm how many coal mining approvals she has approved in this term of government?
The call to the Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Water.
One question about the
fewer than a dozen.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Tangney.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing and Homelessness. How is the Albanese Labor government helping working Australians to buy a home of their own? And are there any alternative approaches that would make it harder to buy a home?
Call to the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Homelessness.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I want to thank my friend, the member for Tangney, for his question. He's a fantastic advocate for more housing in his community and right here in the parliament. Speaker, we all know that we're in the midst of a housing crisis that's been a generation in the making, and after a decade of complete neglect by those opposite, we're tackling this problem from every angle. We know that the long-term fix here is to build more homes, and that's why we're working with the states to build 1.2 million homes over 5 years. And it's why we're making those huge generational investments in social and affordable housing. But, Speaker, first home buyers need our help right now. That's why we've expanded the Home Guarantee Scheme. 150,000 Australians have gotten into home ownership through that scheme since we've been in government, and there's more help on the way. Now, Speaker, after many months of blocking and delay by the Liberals and the Greens, Labor's Help to Buy scheme is coming. This scheme is going to support 40,000 nurses, aged care workers and childcare workers that live in our communities to get into home ownership. They'll do it, Speaker, with a 2% deposit, and the Australian government will help with 30 or 40% of their mortgage. Speaker, as part of the budget, we've expanded the eligibility for that scheme so that more Australians can get that help, to those on middle incomes and to many more homes around the country. Now, Speaker, we're making real progress on housing. Since we've been in government, 500,000 homes have been built around the country. We've got 28,000 social and affordable homes that are in planning and construction. 1 million Australians are getting an increase in Commonwealth rent assistance of 45%, 150,000 first home buyers assisted, and housing approvals are up by 22%. Now, Speaker, there's a lot more work to do here. Housing's been central to our first term, and if we're re-elected, it will be central to our second. Now, I want to contrast that with those opposite. Remember, Speaker, they didn't ever have a housing minister for most of the decade that they were in office. And get this one, Speaker. Did you know that for the entire first 2 terms of the coalition government, they didn't build a single social and affordable house around our country? Not for the entire first 2 terms. And of course we know that they want to cut $20 billion of investment in housing funding in the middle of a housing crisis. But I'm asked for alternatives on home ownership, Speaker, and there's one that really stands out here. It's a real doozy, Speaker, and that is the dud super for housing policy, Speaker. Now, if you went into a laboratory and tried to cook up a way to make the housing problem worse, this is the policy that you'd end up with. It's going to increase house prices by about $92,000 on average across our capital cities.
Just pause.
It'll leave you.
Minister, the member for New England is continually interjecting. I've already warned him. He's now officially warned if he interjects one more time, he'll leave the chamber. It's just not acceptable to be continually interjecting during a minister's answer, no matter who they are. The minister has the call.
Thanks, Speaker. And of course we know this policy is going to leave young people worse off in their retirement. It's going to facilitate a massive intergenerational wealth transfer from the young people who are up here in the gallery to that older property-owning generation. Speaker, it's rare for me to agree with the Leader of the Opposition, but on this occasion I will. He was asked about this proposal in 2017. He said it's just not good policy. Well, for once, he was actually right.
Order. Call to the member for Fairfax. The member for Capricornia is seeking the call.
Thank you.
She has the call.
Thank you.
Order. Capricornia has the call.
My question is to the Minister for Environment. I refer to the Minister's last answer. Can she confirm if she approved more than 6 to 12 coal projects?
Order. Order. No, the member's asked. She's asked a question. Would the minister like to? Yeah. Order. Just for clarity, I'm just going to. No, that's okay. We'll do it right. The member is entitled to ask any questions. Yeah. She's going to be given the courtesy, and she'll ask the question again.
Thank you. So I refer to the minister's last answer, where she said that she had approved less than 12 coal-fired coal mines. Can the minister confirm what the number was between 6 and 12?
The minister has the call.
Okay.
Well done, Michael.
Order.
I thank the member for her question. The number of coal mines or extensions approved is 10. 4 have been cancelled. Gas projects, there have been 3 extraction projects approved, and renewables, more than 80 have been approved. And there are about another 130 in the system, which I think is a real indication of the way our economy is changing. I understand why the Liberals and Nationals are sensitive about this, because they were warned when they were in government that there were 24 coal-fired power stations facing closure, and they did absolutely nothing to prepare for those closures. They did nothing to prepare for those closures. What we have done is see this massive rollout of renewable energy, because that's what the market's investing in. Those opposite used to actually believe in market policies, particularly driving our energy sector.
Members on my
they
left.
had They had 22 energy policies. They didn't land a single one. In contrast, the Minister for Energy has actually seen 15 gigawatts of renewable energy already added to our energy grid. That's more than the Leader of the Opposition's nuclear power plants could hope to achieve in 25 years' time if he spends $600 billion of taxpayers' money, if the state and territory governments agree to allow him to change their laws, if he can find 4 times the amount of water that the coal-fired power stations need to generate electricity. I understand why they're sensitive about it. We are on track to see renewable energy reach 82% of our grid by 2030. And I'm really proud to be part of a government that is doing that. This is one of the biggest transformations in Australian history, and it's on track. And it's on track because we've got a Prime Minister that's shown leadership and an Energy Minister that's delivered.
The call to the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How are Australian workers better off under the Albanese Labor government, and what risks are to this progress?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the member for Dunkley for asking a question about the economy and about cost of living, because it's only every second question that you realise that's an issue in Australia, because when we hear from over there, it's on budget day of all days, they've abandoned any discussion about what might be happening in Australian households. Completely abandoned it. There's a series of changes that we've made to workplace laws that have improved people's flexibility and have improved how much money they are getting into their household every single payday. Changes that have been made because of reforms that this side of the House, that the Albanese Labor government have taken to the parliament, that are now finding their way into improved outcomes for the wages of every working Australian. Now, every single one of those changes, those opposite opposed. Every single one of them. And bit by bit, they're gradually letting on that, yes, not only did they oppose them on the way in, they're now wanting to cut them if given their chance. And every Australian worker knows that simple truth that when he cuts, they will pay. When he makes cuts, they will pay in their pay packets every time. Some of the issues he tries to dress up, like we had the whole conversation about working from home. And yet, what was his solution? His solution was job share. Job share. Job share means pay cut. If you've got a full-time job where some of those shifts you're working from home, which some people, you think of the way people can be packed up in traffic in my part of Sydney, you can understand absolutely why some people want this flexibility. If the only answer is job share, that means pay cut. When he cuts, people pay for that. He also wants to scrap the right to disconnect, where he's making sure that people would work longer for less. Once again, he'll cut people's entitlements, they'll pay with the outcomes. But it's workers across the board. Take just one workplace that the Leader of the Opposition might have heard of. One of the changes we made was to get rid of zombie agreements. One workplace had an agreement that had been struck in 2007, meant to have expired in 2012, was still running in 2022. At this workplace, as I say, he will have heard of them, they run some restaurants. The workers were receiving no weekend penalty rates. Some of the workers were receiving no public holiday penalty rates. Some of the workers were being paid 38 hours but working 50 hours. The company was Merivale, and once again the Leader of the Opposition is making it clear he'll cut and workers will pay.
Concluded. Give the call to the member for Kennedy.
Prime Minister, your completion of the Great Inland Highway cuts 1,800 kilometres off the round trip to Melbourne, but there's only intermittent connections to Cairns Paradise Coast tourism, and it's 13% of Australia's farm produce. A tunnel would have rescued 400,000 people trapped last month, resulting in 4 deaths. Brisbane's population 1.2 million. Its Olympics get $62 billion. Brisbane tunnels $36 billion. North Queensland gets nothing. Prime Minister, please give North Queensland diversion of the Upper Herbert, the Seymour-Gairloch Bridge, 1 kilometre bridle tunnel, and Queensland governments past and present a kick in the head.
Just remind all members about the language that they use in questions and how they're phrased. No. That's more than enough, Member for Kennedy. Thank you. Order. Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I thank the member for Kennedy for his question and for his strong and sometimes colourful advocacy for North Queensland. And, of course, I travelled to his electorate to look at the Olera Creek Bridge with the member, with the Hinchinbrook Mayor, with the Queensland Premier, with the Emergency Services Minister following flooding in February. And one of the things I've been working very closely with the Queensland Premier on as well is making sure that we build back better, that we don't just recommit to have things done exactly the same way, because then you get the same wash away when you have a major flood. And I thank the member for his very strong advocacy. It is expected that there will be further heavy rain in days to come as well. We are contributing over $11 billion to disaster recovery efforts right around the country, supporting long-term recovery. But we're also making important investments in his region of the world. Obviously, the Bruce Highway, the additional $7.2 billion that we've committed to that, taking our government's total investment in the Bruce Highway to over $17 billion going forward. The inland freight route, of course, between Mungindi and Charters Towers, $800 million. And that's important. The Coranda Range Road, west of Cairns, $210 million. The Peninsula Development Road, including the Archer River Bridge, some $220 million. And, of course, the Kennedy Development Road as well, $97.3 million to complete the seal between the Lynd and Hughenden, where I visited with the member for Kennedy. I can announce today that this will allow to progressively seal and widen the road as well in the region around Winton. That will make that possible. In tonight's budget, I'm not sure about standing orders in terms of preempting budget announcements, but there's probably been a few in past days. So tonight, as well, I can confirm that there will be additional funding for the Barron River Bridge, which has been really important in terms of connecting up Cairns to the member for Kennedy's electorate as well. That's been something that we've done in cooperation, again, with the Queensland Government. I look forward to working with the member for Kennedy, as I always have, to deliver for his electorate. We have had record funding in roads, but also there's more to do in energy with the Copper String project, with the employment opportunities in his electorate.
The call to the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veteran Affairs and Defence Personnel. What impact have workers at the Department of Veteran Affairs had on claims processing, and are there any threats to that progress that would leave Australian veterans worse off?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Hasluck for her question. It was great to go and visit the Bellevue RSL with her recently for announcement of funding for their new cenotaph, and we went with Trish Cook, the Labor candidate for Bullwinkle, as well, because Bellevue, of course, is changing seat. It was great to meet with all of the veterans out at the Bellevue RSL. But, Mr Speaker, when we came to office there was some 42,000 veteran claims in the backlog at DVA that had not even been looked at by anyone within DVA. But as a result of the Albanese government's investments into the public service by employing more staff in the Department of Veterans Affairs and, importantly, converting those staff from labour hire and non-ongoing contracts into becoming permanent public servants, we have cleared that backlog. But of course there are now more claims coming in to the department than there was ever before. And the workforce is getting through those claims because it's able to work faster than before, reviewing them getting them in front of someone within a fortnight and determining those initial liability claims in just a few months. That means that we need to have more support to get these claims determined, to get benefits and support out the door faster to veterans who need and deserve it, and that's what the Albanese government did. But Senator Hume wants to take the public service back to 2022, when that backlog is what we inherited, and it emerged because there wasn't enough resourcing in the Department of Veterans Affairs. In fact, yesterday she said that increase in staffing to DVA should be reversed. So we've had the opposition leader saying he wants to roll back the additional public servants under this government. Then they said, oh, no, it won't affect frontline staff. And then yesterday, Senator Hume said she specifically wants to cut back on the frontline claims processing staff in the Department of Veterans Affairs. Well, I say to the Senator and I say to the opposition that only in February the Secretary of DVA said in estimates any reduction in staffing numbers would have a rapid impact on decisions. They would start to sit for longer with the department for allocation and for decision. New backlogs would begin to emerge because there would not be the same number of staff as there is every day now to make those decisions. Veterans would wait longer for those determinations and would not be receiving their benefits. So we would see a return to the bad old days of the previous Liberal government, where we'd see a re-emergence of backlogs, where we'd see veterans waiting and not receiving the benefits that they need, the benefits that they deserve to be able to receive. So I have a message to Australia's veterans, that when it comes to the Leader of the Opposition, when he cuts, you pay.
Order. No, it's side to side. Just order. Well, I hope it cuts both ways when that happens. Okay. Order. Give the call to the member for Flinders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure and the Minister representing the Minister for Women. Has the Minister asked her department to identify how much taxpayer money has been siphoned to organised crime through the CFMEU on infrastructure projects, and if so, what action has she taken as a result?
Order. Member for Bruce. The Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local.
Thank you. I'll answer that in my own capacity as the Minister for Infrastructure, who is responsible for the agreement that we have between every state and territory on the delivery of infrastructure projects. Be in no doubt, the behaviour that we've seen from the CFMEU is absolutely unacceptable, and this government has taken the strongest possible action to actually deal with it. 10 years, you talked about it, but you didn't actually do anything about it. This government has placed the union in administration, which means, and the reason that some of these issues are now coming to light is because of that.
Just the minister can pause. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition screaming across the chamber, other members interjecting, the member for Fisher's on a warning, the member for New England's on a... The minister is answering directly a question that she was asked by the member for Flinders. How about we just tone it down, just listen to what the minister is saying. She's providing information to the House, and she deserves to be heard in silence. She has the call.
Thank you. And as I said, that we have taken the strongest action by placing the CFMEU in administration, and some of the issues that are now coming to light are coming to light because it is in administration. And we are dealing with those issues. From an infrastructure point of view, what we did, obviously, we supported this, the appointing of the independent administrators. We asked the Fair Work Ombudsman to undertake a targeted review of all enterprise agreements made by particularly the Victorian branch of the construction division of the CFMEU that apply to the big build projects. We requested that the AFP investigate allegations and work cooperatively with state police to investigate and prosecute any criminal breaches. And we will use our procurement powers to ensure that enterprise agreements on government-funded projects are genuine agreements and that workplaces are free from coercion and intimidation. Really? Really?
Order. The minister will pause. The Leader of the House, the Manager of Opposition Business on point of order.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The point of order is on relevance. It was a very tight question. I asked the minister if she's asked her department how much taxpayers' money has been siphoned to organised crime. Not agreements, not cooperation with other agencies. Have you asked your department, has Australian taxpayers' money been siphoned to organised crime? If you haven't asked your department to do so, you're free to say no.
Just want to make sure the minister is being directly relevant about the question she was asked. It was a very specific question regarding one element of allegations, but she just needs to make sure that her answer, when talking about the subject matter, is directly relevant to what the department has done and what action she's taken.
As the minister who asked, the minister who just interrupted my answer then knows, the Commonwealth does not directly procure infrastructure projects. We do those through agreements with every state and territory. But where the Commonwealth has direct funding and a contracting role, such as with the Western Sydney Airport, I have asked, quite some time ago now, my department to advise me in relation to all of those projects. The Minister for Finance and I wrote to chairs of the ARTC, the Western Sydney Airport Corporation, National Intermodal, seeking assurances that they comply with all relevant laws, demonstrating efficient, effective, economical and ethical expenditure of taxpayer money, and that allegations or instances of improper or criminal conduct be reported immediately. We did that some time ago. And where the Commonwealth partners with states and territories, we've got a new federated funding agreement. And in that agreement, we embedded new requirements that our funding agreement to prevent these issues from occurring, including emphasising the importance of our delivery partners, making sure they are done effectively.
Call to the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Industry and Science. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to make more things in Australia? Are there any risks to Australian manufacturing?
Give the call to the Minister for Industry and Science.
Thanks, Speaker, and thanks to the member for Boothby for the question. She knows the importance of manufacturing to our economic and national security. Making more things here will ensure that we can stand on our own 2 feet and weather global shocks in the global economy. Ensuring Australia is a country that makes things has been a central priority of the Albanese government, which is why we stepped up to back the Whyalla Steelworks, which makes 75% of structural steel in this country going into defence, construction and infrastructure. What's good for Whyalla is good for Australia. It's important to keep making aluminium in Australia, which is why we have a long-term $2 billion plan to do just that. We need to invest in new, smarter, more efficient ways to make steel and aluminium, which is why we have another $750 million invested to do just that. Helping exporters by investing millions to promote our Australian-made brand in new and traditional markets overseas. And our $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund, well, that's seen nearly $500 million out the door over the last few months, backing firms to make more here, from heavy mining equipment to cutting-edge quantum technology, standing shoulder to shoulder with Aussie blue-collar workers and Aussie manufacturing sticking together to forge our own future in the face of an uncertain time. Now, I'm asked about risk, Speaker. Well, those opposite had 3 years to come up with any plan that would show that they could back Australian manufacturing, and they have absolutely nothing to show. The Coalition has no plans because they don't care. Good at pointing out problems, never there with a solution. On everything our government put forward to back Aussie manufacturing, the Coalition said no, just nasty and negative. Why? Because it makes it easier to cut investments in Aussie manufacturing, because they don't have the guts to tell workers now what they will cut. We build, they cut.
Member for Fadden.
They also want these cuts to fund a $600 billion nuclear fantasy that will cost too much, deliver too little and deliver it too late. But what simply stunned me, Speaker, was the failure of the Coalition to back Aussie steel and aluminium in the face of tariffs just announced. They didn't put our country first. They didn't put Team Australia first. They put their political interest first. And then the Coalition leader had the gall to say, oh, we would have saved Australia from those tariffs. The same mob who couldn't build a commuter car park can now navigate international trade. We stood up for the country. Would they sell it out? We will speak up for the nation. No ifs, no buts.
Order. The member for Wanted is seeking the call on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. I was wondering whether the minister could table the document he was reading from.
Was the order? Was the minister reading from confidential documents? Yes, he was. The order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, 50% of Australia's GDP is reliant on nature, yet the bill that your government is ramming through today will further weaken environmental protections by creating an exemption to national nature laws for a polluting industry. It will reduce accountability and risk pushing the World Heritage valued Maugean skate to extinction. With your government and you as PM already breaking the 2022 election promise to strengthen nature laws, do you accept that there can be no trust this election on commitments on protecting the environment?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Warringah for her question, but let's be very clear about what happened with our environmental laws. We went to an election in 2022 saying we would have a National Environmental Protection Authority. That legislation passed this House and sat over there in the Senate for month after month after month, while crossbenchers tried to connect it up with a whole range of other issues that were not related to the legislation that was there. Publicly, they did it. This isn't any secret here. That is what they said. They said unless you take action to stop all forestry, unless you do a whole range of things that they wanted connected to that legislation, they would not pass it. And then when the legislation was eventually before the Senate, the crossbenchers, including Fatima Payman, who was elected as a Labor senator but ratted on the Labor Party to sit on the crossbench, made it clear that she would not. Having received under about 0.1% of the vote, said she would oppose that legislation along with other crossbench members. So be careful what you vote for when you vote independent, because you never know what you will get. What you know from us is we will stand up for the environment. The Greens political party held up that legislation and refused to vote for it for month after month after month. If they had voted for it, they could have at any time. Not only did they not vote for it, there were deferrals just like there was over housing legislation, just like there was over so many issues. Them standing in a corner pretending that they had no responsibility. We have 25 votes in the Senate out of 76. I suggest if people want Labor government legislation, they should vote Labor in both houses when it comes to the election coming up.
Order. 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 The members on my left will cease interjecting, because I'd like to hear from the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How has the Albanese Labor government helped Australians receiving income support payments? What approaches would leave Australians on these payments worse off?
The call to the Minister for Social Services and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Werriwa for her question and for her advocacy for families and people in her electorate. Of course, throughout this term of government, Labor has been working hard to support every Australian deal with the global cost of living pressures that they're under, and that includes people on income support payments and, of course, family payments. Now, we know that it's been tough for many people, and that's why the Albanese Labor government has worked hard to bring inflation down, get wages moving, keep unemployment low and ease cost of living. Now, this, of course, includes action to strengthen our social security safety net, to raise working-age payments and student payments, to give single parents more support and boost Commonwealth rent assistance to help people manage rental pressures. Now, alongside that, we also have our regular indexation to ensure that payments keep pace with cost of living. Now, combined with indexation and our back-to-back increases in Commonwealth rent assistance has increased by 45% in the 3 years that Labor was elected. Of course, pensions are up by 16.7%, giving a single-age pensioner an extra $150 in their pocket every fortnight. This is complemented by Labor's changes to make medicines cheaper, to help households with their power bills and, of course, strengthen Medicare. Now, the members asked me what other approaches there could be to make people worse off, and I'll point her to those opposite, who have declared that government spending on increases in payments, increases in rent assistance and indexation is reckless and wasteful. If elected, they've said that they will start by making $350 billion worth of cuts to government payments and government services, and this is to pay for their $600 billion nuclear folly. Now, we know that this means cuts for pensioners, cuts for single parents, cuts for students and cuts for families. Now, you might ask, Mr Speaker, how do we know that? How do we know that? Well, we know it because they've done it before. We all remember no cuts to the pension. That was a Tony Abbott promise. Well, when they were in government, they cut the pension, they cut family payments and they tried to end bulk billing and make medicines more expensive. There is a choice at this election. Australians can look to us, the Labor government, to build a better future, or those opposite who cannot deal with the cost that this Leader of the Opposition will have, because when he cuts, Australians pay.
Call to the Leader of the Prime Minister.
Ask the further questions be placed on the notice paper.